Hello and welcome to pmslounge.com. In this video, let's talk about how you as a project manager leading your project team can hand over the deliverable of your project to the operations team. How do you do the knowledge transfer to the operations team? Because what is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor. It has a start date and an end date. After the end date, the project manager goes away and works on some other project. The project team gets disbanded. They may be working on some other project from here on. But the deliverable that you created, that is delivered to the customer. And if the customer has an issue, the customer is going to contact the operations team. So the operations team, the team responsible to run business as usual, should understand what you have delivered. They should understand, they should know your deliverable in and out so that they can face the customer and they can resolve any issues that the customer is going to face, right? So this is the reason why it is very, very important to do this handshake between a project manager and an operations manager. Now, important to understand here are these 5 questions that I'm going to talk about. You, as a project manager, your team needs to ensure that you have answers to these 5 questions. And if these 5 questions are answered, you will be able to do the transition successfully. This transition from the project manager to the operations manager so that the team can be disbanded and the team can go on and work on different projects. So let's start off with question number 1, which is who are the stakeholders and who actually signs off. What's happening here is that you have an operations manager. It is possible that this position might be named differently in different organizations. But in addition to the operations manager, it is likely that there is a support team, there's a technical team, there could be, let's say, a sales team. There could be different people who would be interested in this transition, who would be interested in that handshake because they need to know the stuff to be able to face the customer. So the first question to answer here is who are the stakeholders? Who should you as a project manager and who should your team, the project team, should be working with to make sure that this transition happens? And a very important question is who signs off? How do you know that the transition is over? There has to be a point of contact. It could be the operations manager. It could be, let's say, an integration manager or a transition manager, because there are job titles like these in certain organization, right? And their job is to basically sign off and to basically confirm that the handshake between the project team and the operations team is now complete. So the first question that you need answer to is who are the stakeholders, and if there is a transition or an integration manager, who is the single point of contact that you are basically handing off your project deliverable to. So this is the question number 1. Now let's move on to question number 2, which is essentially, is there a transition template? Because what happens is, if this is a unique project where a transition has never taken place in the past, then it is likely that you do not have a template. But most of the times you will find that organizations do these kind of handshakes and do these kind of knowledge transfer often, and it is possible that they may have a template, a checklist, or some sort of knowledge base that you as a project manager can refer to ensure how you are going to create a transition plan. Because what you need here, the reason you're looking for a template is to create a transition plan, because you need to have that plan. You need to make sure that the stakeholders that you identified as part of step 1, question number 1, you need to make sure that they agree to the transition plan. It may include things like a contingency or a fallback plan as well. And if you observe this closely, it is like a mini project in itself. Doing this handshake may require some cost, may require time, may require, what is the scope. That all is something you will be able to define if you have a transition plan with you. So look out for any templates that might already be available. look out for lessons learned, document, speak to people that have done such kind of transitions in the past as well, to be able to come up with a successful transition plan. Now let's move on to step 3, that is training required? This is question number 3. Do you need training, or does the operations team member, do they need training? What kind of plan you need to create to make sure that the training is actually happening? Are there any materials that you need to create? And most of the times it is possible that your engineering team, your development team, may need to create some sort of materials as well for the operations team, because that might be used for their training purposes. It is possible that they might ask you to create an FAQ sort of document, just to document the questions that document the answers to the questions that they have during the period of this transition. So whatever training is required, whatever documentation training material is required, that is something that you need answer to. That is question number 3 that you should have in place. It is also possible that a handover sort of document is also created, a user manual of sort, because that is not something the operations team is going to create. That is something that the engineering team needs to create. How should a customer, the end customer, the end user of your deliverable, how should they be using your deliverable, right? So that kind of documentation might also be required, and all of that is being answered when you raise this question of training requirement. All right, let's move on to question number 4, and that is, what quality checks are needed? Is there any kind of testing that needs to be done? And how do you close? How do you make sure? Is there a definition of done, if I may say so, right? So if there is any kind of testing that is being done, what are the results to those tests that we expect, right? And when are you going to take your hands off as a project team? When are you going to take your hands off and be able to tell the operations team that, all right, we are done, you are now on your own? That is how you are answering question number 2. How do you close, right? What needs to happen for the operations team to be 100% sure that transition is done and the project team can take their hands off now? And one last question to ask in this category itself is, how do you meet the requirement so that the person who is responsible to sign off, he was the one who was identified in question number 1, right? Who signs off? So is there any specific requirement that you as a project manager or the project team needs to meet for this sign off to take place? That is all questions. These are all questions that should be answered in question number 4. Any kind of testing required, any kind of quality checks that are needed, how do you actually close the transition? And finally, question number 5 is, what is needed for downtime and cutover planning? Now, this is the actual handoff that we are talking about from your environment, the delivering organization's environment, to a customer environment. Let's talk about a non IT project. Maybe let's talk about a construction project. You have constructed an apartment building, and now you want to hand over this building to the end user, the person who has purchased that building. What exactly is needed here, right? What is there's obviously not going to be any downtime or cutover requirement here, but what exactly is this process of handover? How do you hand over the product to the customer? And if we talk about IT projects, we may take an example of, let's say, moving a database that has billions of entries, and you're moving this database from one environment to another environment. So this just required downtime as well, right? And it might require some sort of communication to users or the end customers that, hey, we are doing this move on so and so date, and this is where our system will not be available. This is downtime for us, right? Now, is there any kind of fallback and contingency plan that you need to have here? Because let's say this move of database, it doesn't go as per the plan, then what is your fallback or contingency plan? That is also something that you need to plan for when you ask questions like these, which is, what is needed for downtime and what is the cutover planning? It is possible that if this kind of cutover this entire process is going to take, let's say, 3 days or 4 days, then it is possible that your team might require to be present 24 by 7 to be on standby. People might have to work in shifts for these 3 4 days to make sure that if any issue arises, those issues are tackled then and there. So, downtime, cutover planning, this is very, very important to be planned in advance. And these are the 5 questions that you should be asking, right? If you have answers to these questions, who are the stakeholders? Who signs off? Is there a transition template that you can use to create your transition plan? Is training required? What quality checks or testing is needed? How do you actually close the transition process? And finally, what is needed for downtime and cutover planning, right? So you need to plan your downtime, you need to plan your cutover, you need to basically, in this fifth question, what you're actually doing is handing over your deliverable to the end customer. So a quick reminder, if you have any questions for me, head over to pmclounge.com/lounge access and you can book a time slot with me to answer your questions around project management and PMP certification. That's all in this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you are going to be doing really good transition plans from here on. Like, share, subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. If you like our work, consider contributing using the thanks button on YouTube or the pmclounge.com/contribute page. Check out our website, pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP and project management resource. Thank you and have a nice day.